Cast. Listen on Sounds. Grab your paintbrush, press red now. Alan Carr's Interior Design Masters back for a new series of transformations on iPlayer.
Coming this Red Nose Day, The Traitors, the movie, starring Saran Jones as Claudia Winkleman.
Who is the traitor?
Plus Alan Partridge, French and Saunders, and the return of W1A.
So that's all good.
Comic relief, funny for money. Starts tomorrow at 7 on BBC One and iPlayer.
It's Sarah, it's tea time. Are you all right, you absolute legends? Look, I know you're just trying to get home. I feel your pain, baby. Don't worry, I've got some great tunes. Make every day less every day with BBC Radio 2.
The government outlined a new definition of extremism, and already it's come under attack. From the church, from Muslim groups, from former Home Secretaries, from Conservative backbenchers. We're in Liverpool tonight to see what people here make of it. That's Question Time on iPlayer now, and straight after the news.
This is BBC One in the Northwest. Now the BBC News with Clive Myrie and Katie Walderman at 10 o'clock.
At 10, one of the most important figures in American politics, the majority leader in the Senate, says Israel's prime minister has lost his way. Chuck Schumer accuses Benjamin Netanyahu of pushing support for Israel to new lows and says there should be fresh elections. It comes as the White House imposes new sanctions on Israeli settlers accused of harassing and attacking Palestinians. We'll be live in Washington, also tonight. Last summer's UK air traffic control meltdown. Now we know what went wrong. Rishi Sunak says there'll be no general election on May the 2nd, the same day as the local elections. At the Fashion Bible British Vogue, we speak to its first black female editor. And another female first as Anna Wells scales all Scotland's mountains above 3,000 feet in one winter season.
And in the northwest, 100 years behind bars for the gang caught in Cumbria's biggest ever drugs investigation. And a Hillsborough survivor calls for the Leppings Lane end to be bulldozed after Newcastle supporters experience a near miss.
A very good evening to you. One of the most prominent figures in American politics, the majority leader in the Senate, has called for new elections in Israel. Chuck Schumer says Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has lost his way and accused him of pushing support for Israel to new lows. Mr. Schumer, a Democrat and the highest-ranking Jewish official in America, also called for the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas to step down, saying a new generation of leaders was needed to work towards peace. All this comes as the US imposed sanctions on 3 extremist Israeli settlers in the occupied West Bank, who've been accused of harassing and attacking Palestinians. The settler movement is controversial, with many countries, including the UK, which sees Israel as an occupying power and the settlements as illegal. Israel disputes this. West Bank violence has surged since the start of the Gaza war, triggered by Hamas's attack on Israel on October the 7th. The US and UK have already imposed financial restrictions on some Israeli settlers, as Lucy Williamson now reports from Zanuta in the southern Hebron Hills.
Yinon Levy says he's never been violent towards his Palestinian neighbours. That he is the victim of attacks, not the perpetrator. The US and UK governments say different. So does Faris Samamri, a Palestinian shepherd who says he was forced out of his home in a village overlooking Levy's farm.
Some people were afraid of him, but my wife wasn't. He told her, "You will get out," and she shouted and swore at him that we won't. He said, "You are dogs and you should all die." Then he hit her with his gun.
Yinon Levy established this hilltop farm near Hebron 3 years ago with the financial backing of the state. He's now the target of sanctions by America and the UK.
When there is Jewish presence, then there is no Arab presence. We keep a watchful eye on the land, ensuring that no unauthorized construction takes place, keeping the area under Jewish ownership.
We showed Yinon this video of him apparently entering a Palestinian village with a gun. He declined to comment. Britain said that he and another man used physical aggression, threatened families at gunpoint, and destroyed property as part of a targeted effort to displace Palestinian communities. Yinon says he didn't.
I'm not worried. This is not against me personally. It's against those who obstruct the creation of a Palestinian state. There's no legal process against me here in Israel. Here everything is fine. And in the end, the government is on my side.
There's been a show of support from some Israeli politicians, like the ultra-nationalist Zvi Sukkot, a settler himself.
You say it's just a few people.
The UK says Israel's failure to act has led to an environment of near total impunity for extremist settlers in the West Bank.
When we have a functioning judicial system in Israel, we don't want our allies to say, we'll do the job for you. If there was evidence against Yinon Levy, he would be in Israeli prison. Who is Britain to come and say, we are smarter than Israeli security services?
New US sanctions today target another farm belonging to Moshe Sharvit. This crowdfunding campaign for a synagogue and education centre there, now at risk. Yinon Levy's Israeli bank account blocked weeks ago. A far-right cabinet minister has raged against the insult to Israel's sovereignty, but it will please some of the US president's voters back home. The UN says more than 15,000 Palestinians were displaced from their homes in the West Bank last year, 80% of them after the Gaza war began. The sanctions have not led Fares to return home. His village of Zanuta still stands empty, the Levy farm clearly visible on the next hill. Settlers point to attacks by Palestinians and say they are scared. But it's Palestinians who are leaving. Lucy Williamson, BBC News, South Hebron Hills.
Let's go to Washington now and Nomia Iqbal, who's live on Capitol Hill. Nomia, one wonders just how serious these comments are from Chuck Schumer, a very senior political figure, about Benjamin Netanyahu apparently losing his way.
I think it's really hard to overstate, Clive, just how extraordinary the comments are by Mr. Schumer. Look, there is rising public anger over the death toll in Gaza. You have progressives within the Democratic Party who have long called for a ceasefire. You have those who are staunch supporters of Israel, and that includes Mr. Schumer, who has embraced Israel in his decades-long career. But in a speech here at the Capitol, he said that there are 4 obstacles in the way of peace in Israel, Gaza and the West Bank. He said, number 1, Hamas and the Palestinians who support them. Number 2, radical right-wing Israelis in government and society. Number 3, the president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas. And this.
The 4th major obstacle to peace is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has all too frequently bowed to the demands of extremists.
The reaction has been pretty divisive amongst Democrats and Republicans. You've also got Israel, Washington's ambassador in Israel, saying that the comments were unhelpful. Now, Clive, in terms of President Biden, he's not specifically commented on what Mr. Schumer has said, but the White House did say Mr. Schumer is entitled to his opinions. However, what he said does not represent the administration's position on Israel.
OK, Nomia, thank you. Nomia Iqbal there, live on Capitol Hill. Now, the chaos was extensive. Around 750,000 passengers were affected by last August bank holiday's air traffic control meltdown. Flights into and out of British airports were badly hit, leaving people stranded all over the world. Now, a report from the Civil Aviation Authority says the problems were made worse because engineers were on call but not on site to deal with the mess. Here's Katie Austin.
It was the major meltdown that triggered flight chaos on the busy August bank holiday Monday, causing misery for nearly 750,000 passengers.
We booked to take the kids to Dublin for the day and just got here and told it's been cancelled.
We've had to fork out nearly £1,000 for hotels for the next 4 nights.
Here's how it unfolded. Just after 8:30 that morning, NATS's automatic system became confused by a flight plan and responded by shutting down. Staff now had to process flight plans manually, which takes much longer. 4 hours of data is kept in the system as a buffer, but the clock was ticking to try and fix it. Around 9, NATS engineers contacted a more specialist colleague who was on call remotely because it was a bank holiday. An hour later, it was decided they should go in. They didn't arrive until around 11:45. Another more senior engineer was also contacted. By lunchtime, delays were mounting up and cancellations had started. Queues had built up at airports. Here's Edinburgh. NATS eventually called in the software manufacturer, and 6 hours after the technical issue had begun, the system could operate normally again. Gradually, flight restrictions were eased. But that was far from the end of the story. There were mass cancellations.
Our flight's been rescheduled for this afternoon, but there's other flights here that have been cancelled going into London, so we're just hoping to get out today.
Passengers found airports, hotels and crucially alternative flights home had quickly become full. Some people ended up stranded abroad for days.
EasyJet cancelled my flight on Monday and they have booked me to return back on the 8th of September. I am more than 17 weeks pregnant now.
They weren't able to book us onto anything until Thursday morning.
A new report says there had been a lack of planning for an incident like this. Airlines racked up tens of millions of pounds in costs. They said today NATS's basic resilience planning and procedures were wholly inadequate. NATS said it had already made improvements. A final report is due later this year. Katie Austin, BBC News.
At least 60 people are reported to have died trying to cross the Mediterranean from Libya. Around 25 people were rescued from the overcrowded inflatable, saying the engine cut out 3 days into the crossing, leaving them drifting without food or water. The survivors are being taken to Italy. Nick Beek is in Brussels with the very latest. Nick, another tragedy, it seems, in the Mediterranean.
Yes, some really distressing details here, Clive. The vessel was actually spotted by a French charity that tries to rescue people at sea, and they released this video in which you see the 25 survivors. They said they'd been at sea for a week. They were then taken to a bigger rescue vessel. They were given blankets and other sort of support, and it was at this point that they said that during the course of their voyage, some 60 of their fellow passengers had actually died from hunger and dehydration along the way, including a baby and her mother. Tonight, the survivors are still at sea, hoping to be able to make their way to Italy. Now, I've been talking to the European Union's border agency Frontex, and they've confirmed to me tonight that one of their aircrafts on the day that this vessel set off, that they actually spotted a vessel overcrowded with more than 50 people on board. This was within Libya's international zone of rescue, and so Frontex are saying that they contacted the Libyan authorities, also the Italian authorities and the Maltese authorities. Now, if there was some sort of official rescue attempt, we certainly don't know about it. And the thing is, Clive, these sort of attempted crossings are happening all the time. The United Nations said that last year 3,000 people died trying to cross the Mediterranean, the highest figure since 2017. And the thing is, the true figures are thought to be much, much higher. And the United Nations have told us tonight that they fear that this year it could be a record-breaking one for all the wrong reasons.
Indeed. OK, Nick, thank you for that. Nick Beek there live in Brussels. A 17-year-old boy has admitted killing a schoolgirl who was stabbed at a bus stop in South London last September. Eliane Andam, who was 15, was attacked in Croydon on her way to school. At the Old Bailey, the teenager, who can't be named because of his age, pleaded guilty to manslaughter but denied murder. The plea was not accepted by prosecutors, and he'll stand trial in November. Now, the government has released a new definition of extremism, which ministers say is to stop the promotion of hatred, violence and intolerance. It's part of a promise to tackle what ministers say is an increased threat to the UK. The new terminology will be used to assess whether groups or organisations are eligible to receive public funding or support. Critics, however, argue that freedom of speech and the right to public protest could be affected. Here's Damien Grammaticus.
We want boycott!
Conflict in the Middle East driving polarisation here. The government says it's not seeking to stop protests or curb free speech, but it needs to deal with groups whose actions, while lawful, are a threat to democracy. So this isn't a new law, but Michael Gove will have the power to label groups extremist, cut them off from contact with government or any funding.
Our definition will not affect gender-critical campaigners, those with conservative religious beliefs, trans activists, environmental protest groups. But the government cannot be in a position where, unwittingly or not, we sponsor, subsidise or support in any way organisations and individuals opposed to the freedoms we hold dear.
We need much stronger action to tackle the corrosive forms of hatred that devastate lives and corrode communities. But today's statement does not go far enough. And regardless of how workable and effective this new definition and centre of excellence is, this announcement will not be enough.
The new definition, like the old one, says extremists aim to undermine or replace the UK's system of democracy or destroy fundamental rights and freedoms. What it adds is that they promote an ideology based on violence or intolerance, and it can be by creating a permissive environment for others. Mr Gove named 2 groups he said promote neo-Nazi ideology, and 3 he claimed have Islamist views. He'll assess them to see if action is needed.
I fear that the definition, though well-intentioned, lands in no man's land, not going far enough to tackle the real extremists, not doing enough to protect the non-extremists, those people who are simply expressing contrarian views.
We've just heard One, MEND, says its aim is to advocate for Muslim communities and tackle Islamophobia. Are you extremists?
We're not at all. We've worked with police forces, we've worked with Muslim organisations, non-Muslim organisations, and we definitely don't fall into the new extremism definition that Michael Gove has put forward.
So if he puts you on this list, you will take him to court?
We will. We've already sent legal notice to his department.
In North London this evening, a multi-faith gathering to break today's Ramadan fast. Here they say the government hasn't done enough to consult with communities who have a stake in this.
It will divide because it won't create a sense in which everyone is being treated equal.
To impose something in this way just feels to me to be not the right way to do it, especially at the moment.
The government says this is about protecting communities, but controversial too is that it'll take just the decision of a minister to put a group on the list, but an expensive High Court challenge to get off it. Damien Grammaticus, BBC News in North London.
There have been claims the Conservative Party has received further donations from the businessman Frank Hester, whose alleged comments about the MP Diane Abbott have been described by Rishi Sunak as racist and wrong. Ian Watson is at Westminster for us. Ian, any response from the Conservative Party to this?
Yes, but don't hold your breath. It's a pretty short one, Clive. We asked about these claims of further donations. They gave us a one-line statement. It says, declarable donations will be published by the Electoral Commission in the usual way. Now, you might wonder, what on earth does that mean? Well, we know that Frank Hester gave £10 million to Conservatives last year, but the Electoral Commission, which oversees the rules on donations, hasn't published any political donations for 2024. We won't get that information until June. But what set a hair running here at Westminster was a report by Tortoise Media. They have suggested that the Conservatives are indeed sitting on an extra wad of cash from Mr Hester. Now, the Conservatives haven't specifically denied that, but they won't say any more than that short statement that I just read out. Mr Hester himself, though, in a newspaper interview last month, didn't rule out further donations if, quotes, it would help Rishi. Talking of whom, the Prime Minister in an ITV regional interview tonight ruled out holding a general election on May the 2nd. That's the same day as local elections and seen as the most likely date for an early election. Now, to be fair to him, he's always said that his working assumption would be that the general election would be held in the second half of the year. But by ruling out early May, rather inevitably, rather predictably, Labour and the Lib Dems are accusing Rishi Sunak of bottling it.
OK. Ian, thank you. Ian Watson there at Westminster. The result of Russia's three-day-long presidential election, where polls opened earlier this evening, isn't in doubt. Vladimir Putin is expected to win, say his critics, because his most serious challengers are either in prison, in exile or dead. Victory would give him a fifth term in office, but what of the country he's ruled for nearly a quarter of a century? Steve Rosenberg has been to the town of Borovsk, south of Moscow, and found two very different slants on the state of modern Russia.
These days, when Vladimir Ovchinnikov paints Russia, the result is very dark. From a mountain of skulls and a dictator's ambition to this, Russia's war in Ukraine likened to Stalin's terror. The 86-year-old artist had taken his anti-war message onto the streets of Borovsk, graffitiing "Stop the War." All these paintings were scrubbed out, and Vladimir fined twice for discrediting the Russian army. But he continues to speak out against the invasion of Ukraine.
I believe that this is a crime against the territorial integrity of a neighboring country. It's a crime. And if I keep silent about it, it's like I'm condoning it.
Last month, after the death in prison of opposition leader Alexei Navalny, Vladimir went into town. On this memorial to victims of political repression, he painted Mr. Navalny's face. It was quickly erased. But Vladimir has created this Navalny portrait at home.
Where's Russia heading? Some say we're on our way to more repression, totalitarianism, and to full dictatorship.
But there is another picture of Russia, one much brighter, the official version. The picture the authorities want Russians to see is not of a country that is aggressive abroad and repressive at home, but a Russia with a glorious past and a bright future, of heroes and patriots who not only love their country, but also their current president. Instead of dictatorship, it's devotion to the leader on state TV and an action man president flying high and on course for an election landslide. Mind you, Vladimir Putin faces no serious challenge. His fiercest critics are in exile or in prison, or in Alexei Navalny's case, dead.
It's absolutely impossible to say about our presidential election that this election is fair and free.
Politician Boris Nadezhdin was barred from running in the election. He claims it was because his anti-war message was growing too popular with the public.
In Russia we have propaganda, and we have a myth that everybody in Russia support Putin and everybody in Russia support the special military operation. It's really not the fact. And my election campaign showed that a lot of people against the Putin's politics and a lot of people against the special military operation.
But he's on the ballot. Although when I caught up with the communist candidate Nikolai Kharitonov, he praised Putin. Vladimir Putin, he said, is consolidating the nation for victory. And back in Borovsk, many seem to believe that. I hope Putin wins, Lyudmila says, although we do have talented leaders who could run the country in an emergency. A Putinless Russia means an emergency. Now that is a picture the Kremlin will be more than happy to see painted. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Borovsk.
From 1920 starlets to the supermodels of the 90s, the fashion Bible, British Vogue, has seen it all. Now the glossy magazine has a new boss. Choma Nadi has replaced Edward Enninful to become the first ever black woman to sit in the editor's chair. Ahead of her first publication, Noor Nanji has been to meet her.
Style, famous faces, outlandish outfits. For decades, Vogue and its editors have informed us of the biggest fashion trends. Now the British magazine has a new woman in charge, determined to make her mark.
Yeah, his show was one of the best.
You're the first woman of colour to hold this post. What does that mean to you?
It's obviously an incredible honour, and I think thinking about the sort of younger baby Choma, thinking about what she might have thought. And I know how meaningful it is for younger people to see someone like me, who looks like me, in a position like this. My first childhood memories is just fixating on a pair of shiny shoes, these patent leather shoes when I was a kid, and I just remember getting my dad to buy them because my mom wouldn't. And I feel that getting dressed is one of the most joyful things I get to do every day, and I like to bring a sense of colour and joy and optimism, which is great.
Choma spent the last 14 years working at Vogue in New York before returning to London, where she grew up.
The thing I brought to American Vogue was a sense of British style and that eccentricity and that sense of cherry picking from different things. And I think leaving the UK made me realise just how much of a London girl I was. I really love this cover image.
For her debut issue, Nadi chose to feature the singer FKA Twigs, a nod to her early days as a music journalist.
That colour was all over the runways this season.
The magazine's circulation has remained steady over recent years, but it does still face challenges. Vogue has been criticised for being out of touch and for displaying fashion that is unaffordable to most people. What would you say to that?
For me, when I open a magazine, that's really what I want to see. And there is obviously a fantasy aspect to fashion, and that's obviously what drew me in too as a young person.
And how would your colleagues describe you? Are you sort of a terrifying Devil Wears Prada type editor, or are you more easygoing?
I'm not terrifying. I would say I'm pretty easygoing, but I also have a really strong sense of what I like. So this is...
Her new chapter starts now as she takes the helm of the industry's fashion bible. Noor Nanji, BBC News.
The SpaceX company has successfully tested a rocket in space as it aims to produce a reusable craft to take people to the moon. The Starship rocket broke up as it headed back to Earth, but the mission has been declared a success, as Palab Ghosh explains.
New objectives that'll eventually get us to that glorious, rapid, reusable future.
Twice before, Starship blew up just minutes after launch. Was this going to be third time lucky? So far, so good.
We are feeling the rumble. We are seeing 33 out of 33 Raptor engines ignited.
And now, the critical part, where it blew up before. The successful separation of the upper and lower sections.
Kate, we got a Starship on its way to space and a booster on the way back to the Gulf.
Oh man, I need a moment to pick my jaw up from the floor because these views are just stunning.
And here's a view of the lower section falling back to Earth.
A few engines.
But then communication is lost.
And acquisition of signal. We'll see if we can get some other video.
But back in space, it's all going fine, and the upper section begins re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere.
This is where the Earth's atmosphere is doing the work to slow us down.
Its heat shield red hot until its signal is lost.
Yeah, again, this is the furthest and fastest that Starship has ever flown.
But overall, it's been a good day for the flight team.
Looks like success today. They haven't managed to bring the booster back, but that's, I think, a readily solvable problem with a few more trials. And it looks like the Starship activities in orbit have gone very well.
Wow.
Things keep going wrong because SpaceX is testing brand new technologies, but each time they get a little bit further. Starship is absolutely enormous. It's 120 meters tall, that's nearly 400 feet. The rocket has two main parts. At the bottom is a super heavy booster, which is incredibly powerful with its 33 engines. On top is the spacecraft, which can carry a cargo or a crew of an astonishing 100 people. And what makes it really special is that in theory, both parts are reusable. The eventual aim is to build a spacecraft able to send astronauts back to the moon. And maybe one day, take them to Mars. Palab Ghosh, BBC News.
Back on Earth, a mountaineer from Inverness has become the first woman to reach the top of all of Scotland's 282 mountains in one winter season that are higher than 3,000 feet. Now, they're known as Munros, and Anna Wells took 83 days to complete what is called the Winter Munro Round, finishing on Cairngorm.
Last night on Cairngorm Mountain, surrounded by friends and family, I completed my goal of climbing all 282 Munros in a single winter season. I finished a week early, matching the 83-day record set by Martin Moran in 1985. The combination of total euphoria, sleep deprivation and extreme winds made it a surreal moment I will never forget. In my longest day, I climbed 10 Munros in 19 hours and 64 kilometres.
Absolutely freezing!
I got every variety of winter weather and 10 named storms hit the UK during the first month. I had many moments where I was alone in the dark, deep in the mountains, battling through blizzards and wading through snow. But I also had many glorious sunny days, skipping along snowy ridgelines and laughing with friends, witnessing breathtaking sunrises and sunsets that will stay in my memory forever. People have been asking me how I found the determination to keep going day after day. But to be honest, I woke up almost every day feeling excited to go into the mountains, and I feel like I've just had the best 3 months of my life.
Some amazing pictures. Congratulations there to Anna Wells. An amazing job. Time for a look at the weather now. Here's Thomas. It didn't rain for her much there, did it?
It's a bit of a mixed bag out there, but I'll tell you what, the sun's getting stronger now. And today, the temperature in the southeast, actually at St James Park in London, reached 18 degrees Celsius. To be precise, 18.1. But it wasn't the case everywhere. For example, in the lowlands of Scotland, it was raining at about 5 degrees. So what's in store for tomorrow? We've got rain at times, some bright spells. If you're popping out for any lengthy period of time, I would take a brolly. You might need it at some point or another. So the forecast through the night then, extensive cloud and rain across Scotland, some heavy rain moving through the Lake District as well, and through the early morning we'll also see heavy showers reaching some southern parts of the UK as well. But really mild first thing. 11 degrees in London, double figures for Liverpool. Scotland's going to be a little bit cooler. Now low pressure is basically crossing the country during the course of Friday, so that means rising air, clouds will be building. Some of the clouds will produce pretty hefty showers. There could even be some cracks of thunder across southern parts of the UK. Further north, I think it's thicker cloud, more persistent rain at times, but notice the winds. They're coming in from the north, all the way from the Norwegian Sea. So temperatures of only 7 degrees in Aberdeen, 10 degrees in the lowlands of Scotland. But from Yorkshire southwards towards London and the south coast, I still think we're going to have around the mid-teens. And then early in the morning on Saturday, if you're up, perhaps for an early morning run, walking the dog in the park, a touch of frost in 1 or 2 spots. Now Saturday, a little bit of a question mark just how quickly that rain is going to reach eastern parts of the country, but I think your best bet for sunshine is across Scotland. Aberdeen fresh there, but at least it's got to be sunny. The rest of the country, southwesterly winds will push in thick cloud. Here's the outlook for the next few days. So we've got the weekend and into next week, pretty much every weather icon that's possible, but the temperatures sticking around the mid-teens in the south and about 10 to 13 in the north. Clive, it's over to you.
OK, Thomas, thank you. Thomas Schaffenacker there. That's it. Now it's time to join our colleagues for all the news where you are. Have a very good night.
Good evening, I'm Katie Walderman. Welcome to North West Tonight. Nine men from across the northwest have been jailed for a total of more than 100 years after plotting to supply £53 million worth of cocaine. They were arrested as part of an investigation into the importing and distribution of Class A drugs across the UK, which unravelled following the seizure of drugs in the Lake District, as Mairead Smith reports.
Dressed in shorts and sliders, this is Rhys Barnes making his way to a lockup in Windermere, where he stored stashes of cocaine. When 1 kilogram of the drug was seized here last February, it blew apart a nationwide conspiracy.
The investigation started to look at the networks that Rhys was involved in, and over time managed to establish that there was a significant network across the United Kingdom and with links to international, and we were talking about millions of pounds worth of cocaine distribution.
The 31-year-old has been jailed for 12 years and is one of 9 men who took part in what's been described as Amazon-style drug dealing. Andrew Stevens from Golborne near Wigan will serve the longest time behind bars, 20 years.
Andrew Stevens and Simon Buller were effectively at the top of the operation. They were involved extensively in those links internationally and with bringing drugs into the UK.
More than 300 kilos of cocaine was brought into UK ports over a 15-month period, stored in warehouses and distributed to towns and cities across England, Wales and Scotland.
OK, stand by.
Officers worked across the country to find the men involved.
White male, balding head, mid-50s, glasses.
This footage shows the arrest of Anthony Warhurst from Lee, a so-called courier in possession of 50 kilograms of cocaine.
Under arrest on deck, conspiracy to supply Class A drugs. You do not have to say anything.
Scott Owen from Tildesley was arrested on board a plane at Manchester Airport.
I think it sends a really strong message. First of all, there are no untouchable criminals out there, and we, along with law enforcement partners, demonstrate that we can reach you wherever you are.
A 10th man, 45-year-old Simon Buller from Atherton near Bolton, will be sentenced next month. Mairead Smith, BBC North West Tonight.
Next tonight, overcrowding at Sheffield Wednesday's Hillsborough Stadium last year has been described as a near miss after an official review. Newcastle United fans who were watching their side in an FA Cup tie reported being crushed in the Leppings Lane end. 97 Liverpool fans died after a crush in the same part of that stadium in 1989, as Phil McCann reports.
Overcrowding in the Leppings Lane end at Hillsborough. But this was last January. This is what happened in 1989, again at the Leppings Lane end. 97 Liverpool fans were unlawfully killed here. An inquest found a series of problems with crowd control and the design of the stadium. The response was that lessons had been learnt.
I don't think they've learnt a great deal, to be honest. The stadium, I say, the alterations on that stadium aren't enough. It's still extremely dangerous.
Last January, Newcastle met Sheffield Wednesday at Hillsborough. The away fans reported a lack of stewarding, fans being directed through the wrong turnstiles, and congestion at the exit to a tunnel into the Leppings Lane end, the tunnel that Liverpool fans streamed into nearly 35 years ago.
Everybody was just crowded in the middle and just stuck in the middle. And it took around about 25, 30 minutes into the game for people to actually move into their seats. So it was really, really strange, to be honest.
No one was injured here last January, but now a senior council official has said it was a near miss. An official review found the stand wasn't over capacity, but there was a lack of proactive stewarding, and parts would have felt crowded. Since then, changes to stewarding have been agreed, CCTV has been improved, and the capacity of the Leppings Lane end has been reduced. But that's not enough for some.
I feel that section of the stadium needs to be pulled down and rebuilt. It's a disaster waiting to happen. If we ever met Sheffield Wednesday in an FA Cup game, I know tens of thousands of people, they just would not be able to return to that stadium.
The club initially defended its stewarding here, but has since accepted the recommendations for changes to the Leppings Lane end. Phil McCann, BBC North West Tonight.
In other news tonight, a van hire company has apologised to local residents after parking dozens of its vehicles nose to tail on New Brighton Promenade. After we featured the story last night, West Wallasey Van Hire wrote an open letter saying it was sorry for the inconvenience caused. A heritage Blackpool tram has been named after the legendary Liverpool comedian Sir Ken Dodd. Ken's wife Anne unveiled the tram and hopped on board for the ceremonial first ride. The very first Manx banknote issued has sold at auction for £24,000. The £1 note dates back to November 1882 with the serial number 1. Next to sport, and Liverpool are through to the quarter-finals, while in Super League, Wigan Warriors beat Salford Red Devils 22 points to 12. Time now for a look at what the forecast has in store for us. Here's Kay.
Hello again. Good evening. It's been really mild today. We hold on to the mild air just tomorrow. It's going to get colder for Saturday. Mild air returns into Sunday. Under the influence of low pressure, as it sweeps to the east, we pull down that northerly, so cooler air as we head into the weekend for a short time. Now, as we head overnight tonight, we lose the showers, but you'll see this sways affecting the Isle of Man, parts of Cumbria, and northern parts of Lancashire. So cloudier skies here, and there will be rain that is likely to be heavy at times. Elsewhere, clearer skies. Quite a blustery night. Temperatures certainly not cold, 9 or 10 degrees the low. So again, tomorrow morning, the best of the sunshine through the middle part. We still have the cloud and the rain across more northern parts. It will become more patchier. Equally, we'll start to get showers developing into the afternoon across more southern parts. Temperatures 11 to 13 degrees. Now, skies will clear overnight into Saturday. It's going to be a cold and a frosty start to the day. It will cloud over, a few outbreaks of rain, but it returns milder on Sunday. And that's it from me. Night-night.
That's it for now. We're back with bulletins throughout breakfast tomorrow morning. But from all of us here on the Late Team, good night and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
This game belongs to all of us. Man City v Newcastle.
Records are being shattered by the match.
And Chelsea v Leicester.
Oh, it's brilliant!